I'm bold and beautiful. This is a woman's world.
Welcome back to the show. Now, over 20.9 million men and women globally are victims of a crime that is quite simply modern-day slavery. It's a highly profitable venture for its perpetrators who are making billions from this crime. I'm speaking of human trafficking, and Jamaica and Jamaicans are not exempt. In studio with us is the head of the Anti-Trafficking Persons Unit in the Jamaica Constabulary Force, DSP Barry. DSP Barry, thank you so much for joining us to talk about this issue.
Thank you for the invite.
First, out the ballpark, the game, out the gate, what is human trafficking?
All right, human trafficking is globally regarded as an egregious criminal act. It's transnational organized crime. Actually, it's transglobal organized crime. It's impacting every country, and there's no group that has not been affected by this scourge. In short, it is where humans recruit, transport, harbors, exploits for profit other humans. However, there's a legal definition, and it requires it to be understood within that context, especially if we're prosecuting. So there are three critical elements: the activity, the means, and the purpose. Shortly, the activity is where the same individual we spoke about earlier recruits, harbors, transport, or just receive another. However, you have to move down from the activity to the means. And this is where they use all different tactics: coercion, fraud, could be threats, fear, could be just paying somebody, a parent for example, to hand over a child. However, we have not reached human trafficking yet. We are just 2 stages into 3. The third one is the purpose. That's really why they are engaging. It is where they try to have control over mind, soul, and body so that they can exploit people. And so far, we have picked up 14 ways within which persons can be trafficked globally. A rider here is whereas all of the 3 elements should be present and linked at the same time. For children, we don't have to prove the means. So we just require the activity and the purpose. So once it's a child and it's deemed a person under 18, and that person is recruited, transported, harbored, or received by another for the purpose of exploitation, in the case of a child, human trafficking would have been completed. But if it's an adult, we need to prove the means.
Is sex trafficking then maybe just a subcategory of human trafficking?
All right, what we do have is an explosion of definition across the world.
Got it.
So for Jamaica, our definition for human trafficking is all encompassing. We don't separate the categories. Once we find the crime within and the manifestation, then we charge for human trafficking. Now, if it's a subcategory like child trafficking, we can also charge under the Child Care and Protection Act. But we do charge under Section 4, subsection 3 of our Trafficking Person Parent Act. Our definition is different from the one in the US.
Got it. What are some of the penalties for
When we
human
started
trafficking?
in 2007, people could get up to 20 years in prison, but it was quickly amended. And an additional 10 years, especially if there are aggravated circumstances. And in law, aggravated circumstances could be that the person was drugged out, person is a child, was abused in a particular way, exploited in a different way. Then an additional 10 years can be added to that. So in short, you could get up to 30 years in prison if you are found to commit human trafficking in Jamaica.
Well, we are going to hear the story of a young woman who was a victim of human trafficking. We reached out to her and she shared her story with us. We're going to go to that clip now.
So I met my trafficker while crossing the street one day. I saw a car coming towards me and the car looked familiar. And I looked to see if it was my friend's car. I later found out it wasn't when my trafficker got out of the car, introduced himself. He was very polite. He introduced himself. We exchanged numbers. And we had great conversations for several weeks. So there were no red flags that this was a bad person for me. And he said, well, if you have this off-campus apartment and you're still paying bills, why don't you move into my basement apartment where you don't have to worry about rent and bills? That way you can save. And so I did that, and that help that I received led me to be a victim of trafficking. And the first time he put me into a club, in 2 hours, I made $300. And, I started to do the math because I didn't have to take off my clothes. One was touching me. And I said, well, 2 hours, $300. In no time, I'm going to make this $3,000 that I need. He came after my throat again, and I punched him in the face. And he started punching me back in my face, in my stomach, and choked me to the point of unconsciousness where I lost control of my body and fluid. When I regained consciousness, a monster that had just beat me up turned into, a very apologetic person saying, he is so sorry. He doesn't know what happened to him. He lost control and he'll never do this again. And I believed him. 18 months of being physically assaulted, raped, sodomized, and you're witnessing these same things happening to other girls and worse. When we got back to the house, he went upstairs and I kind of stayed downstairs twiddling my thumbs like, what is he gonna do? And I heard the sound of his gun. Like when you load the gun, it makes that click, click sound. When I heard the sound of the gun, something inside me did not want to die that day. It took me at least 7 years to really unpack that trauma, but it's something that I'm still unpacking because restoration is a long-term process. So there are times where, I have these triggers. So when I spoke to my therapist about that, she gave me this candy. It's really sour candy that I would put in my mouth for like 5 seconds, and that would send a message to my brain to break that memory. I was appointed the CEO for Sungate, and at Sungate, we believe education is an avenue of hope. We give scholarships to survivors to go back to school, and in July 2018, I was appointed and became the first anti-trafficking ambassador for Jamaica. That human trafficking is real.
Wow. Yeah, so Shamir Mackenzie, as she said, is Jamaican, went to the US on a track and field scholarship and had an injury, and then I guess her scholarship was suspended and then fell on hard times. And then you heard the rest of the story. DSP Barry, how many times do we see instances like this? How prevalent, how common is that situation?
It's extremely common, and especially in our experience, because we are learning, even though we started long before the rest of CARICOM, because we were the first Caribbean country to have started an anti-trafficking person unit within the police force. We also, in the same year, 2005 going forward, would have started the National Task Force Against Trafficking in Person as well, which is the governmental response to deal with strategic viewpoints and how best to deal with trafficking at the grassroots level in Jamaica. So we are in partnership to fight it. Having rescued in excess of 86 victims, personally and directly speaking and interviewing them, and an additional 3,000 who have not properly self-identified, but we, having done the work, have this inkling that they are victims. We know that it's real.